Okay, so hello, Naila Ranjan, involved with the Oxford Diversify politics movement. Would you like to just maybe tell us, like, briefly in your own kind of words, what you guys are doing, like what are your aims and how you're doing it?
Yeah, sure. So Diversify Politics at Oxford is basically a student-led initiative, and we're trying to increase the diversity of scholars on our reading lists, as well as the topics that we are taught. So we feel that it's too Eurocentric and also American-centric as well. Um, and we also want to make sure that we are being taught by tutors who are coming from, a diverse range of backgrounds as well. So far what we've done is we have penned a letter to the Departments of Politics and International Relations, so the DPIR, and we collated student signatures and we've sent that off.
Okay. So how would you say, like, how would you evaluate kind of the university's response to what you've been doing? Like, have they been kind of happy to work with you and like improve their curriculum?
Yeah, so we first got in touch with the UJCC because we felt that that was, I guess, the most official, the most expected channel of communication to the DPIR, but they said that it wasn't appropriate for them to help us with this initiative. So we then got in touch directly with the incoming head of the Department of Politics and International Relations, so Petra Schleiter. We got in touch with her, and we sent her the letter with the signatures and everything, and she does seem keen to work with us. It was just a bit, so in her message she said that, having these conversations about diversity is a priority for the department, which was great to hear, but it was very much that these conversations would happen in Michaelmas. So we haven't really made any progress in that sense because, we've been told that those conversations, those discussions have to happen, in the future.
Okay, and does that concern you a little bit? Because obviously at the moment, like, kind of the conversation about, like, say, systemic and institutionalized racism is like kind of, it's really at the forefront. Are you concerned that kind of these things are only going to happen when it's kind of maybe died down a bit and you've kind of got less kind of people's attention, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that that's definitely a concern, but at the same time, I think it's so important not to let these conversations die down. I think that we're at a point where you're right to say that, there's so much momentum at the moment. So many people, it's really like a global conversation. It's not even isolated to, let's say, the US, where you can say that that was where the first spark of conversation really happened, obviously after the murder of George Floyd. But I just feel like we can't let those conversations stop. And so even though we're going to be having this discussion with the DPIR in Michaelmas, I feel like we need to keep the momentum going until then. And if we can manage to do that, and I'm really confident that we will manage to do that, I think that we can work on, keeping the conversation going through social media, by sharing updates about our conversations with the DPIR as well. So yeah, it is kind of worrying, but I think that we can't let the conversation die out. And I'm confident that we'll come back in Michaelmas and still be really ready to have those conversations and work on implementing change within the department.
Okay, so how would you suggest that, like, we as a student body do that? So say like me, a politics student who has signed this open letter but has not been, has not kind of been taking an active role so far, and like all the other students in Oxford, how do we make sure that this kind of still like at the front of our sort of collective attention by Michaelmas? What should we do to like kind of get involved and make sure it stays, important?
Yeah, so I think that, we're always happy to have more people involved with the initiative directly, but even if you're not involved with the initiative directly and like planning anything related to that, I think it's important to kind of keep yourself educated and, keep the issues that everyone's been talking about at the forefront of your mind and make sure that it's still it should be a priority for everyone. We need to realize that we really need to be continuing to have these conversations, educating ourselves, trying to actively be anti-racist, trying to tackle other forms of systemic oppression within our societies. So I think that that's a key thing that all students should be doing, but also like coming up with any suggestions about how the politics curriculum or any curriculum really at Oxford could be changed, or any part of the student experience at Oxford could be changed. And I also want to add that it's not just like something that can be isolated to campaigns or initiatives like Diversify Politics. I feel like we can implement this within societies, within colleges, within other groups at university. So it's not just about being involved directly with one of like the Diversify Your Discipline campaigns.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, the diversified discipline, because obviously you're like diversified politics is kind of it's like a branch of diversify your discipline, and this isn't just happening with politics. Like we should stress that. So has there been kind of communication between like you guys and other kind of like groups for say like history and kind of other disciplines that they're trying to kind of get more diversity in? Would you say that any of those branches have kind of had like more or less progress than others?
Yeah, so I think that there definitely has been, well, I wouldn't say direct communication, like there has been communication between different members of Diversify Politics and then other initiatives, but what's really been great is there's a Facebook group for, like, it's called Diversify Your Discipline at Oxford, and there's, like, people are sharing links, resources, and then there's a post with, like, links to all the other initiatives, so, like, for philosophy, classics, English, etc., you know, like, everyone who's trying to actually address or diversify their discipline, which has been really great. So there definitely is communication. When it comes to progress, to be honest, there hasn't been that, like people haven't been sharing how far they've gotten with their initiatives. So I'm not too sure about that. But I have read some of the open letters and it's interesting. I think we're all, you know, calling for very similar things. So that's really promising because it's got, you know, all these different cross-department groups who are calling for very similar things. So I think that there's a lot of room for, if one group has success, for other groups to also be able to use that. Yeah.
So okay, and what about other universities then? Are you aware of kind of similar movements to yours to kind of improve like diversity on like kind of curriculums at like other universities in the UK? You know.
Yeah, so there definitely, I mean, from what I've seen, have been lots of movements at a whole range of different universities, but I feel like everyone's having that same inertia from administration and from, you know, the wider university. So I think that everyone is facing the same challenges. I think this was a while ago though, but I was reading this article and it said that like only 1/5 of UK universities that it was from The Guardian, that they surveyed were actually going to implement some kind of program to address their curriculum so that their curriculum could deal with the harmful legacies of colonialism. So it's like everyone's facing that same inertia, I feel,
Okay.
when it comes to other student movements. But it's really promising to see that it is so widespread. So there's like a movement at SOAS that I saw, and like loads of other universities, which is really great to see. It's by no means like an Oxford thing. Yeah.
I mean, so in your opinion, and I get this might be difficult for you to answer because obviously you're an Oxford student, but would you say that this is kind of more a problem at Oxford than elsewhere? Because obviously Oxford is a very kind of old university that's very kind of focused on its like traditions and its own history and stuff. Would you say that makes it like harder for the university, or like makes the university less likely to kind of be willing to adapt its curriculum and like modernize it, would you say?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, Oxford, like you said, has such a long history, and it's, you know, for centuries been quite an elitist institution. It's still grappling with being an elitist institution, and it needs to do so much more in terms of being accessible and then also inclusive to students from, you know, very diverse range of backgrounds who are talented enough to study here. So I think there's definitely that element which does make it more difficult, but I don't think that's an excuse. I feel like, you know, it is more of a challenge, but we need to be willing to take on that challenge, and, you know, the university needs to be willing to take on that challenge as well. But I think that that's one element where you could say that Oxford does have, I guess, a harder path ahead. I do feel though that discussions about, you know, race, gender, class, like colonialism, empire, all these like different parts of our society today, it's hard to have those conversations anywhere. I think that there's a reluctance to think about. So I'm not British. I'm not from the UK, but I think that there is still a reluctance to have those conversations within Britain, and so for that reason, I think that it's not like Oxford's having a disproportionately hard time compared to any other university.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. A lot of people in the UK like to say that, well, we don't face kind of racist issues in the way that the US do, but it's not that ours aren't any less serious. It's that we're a lot more going under the surface than we are, because we don't talk about race kind of anywhere near enough. So actually, kind of on that topic about like the problems that Oxford specifically faces, obviously, like it's no secret that Oxford is kind of, a lot of Oxford colleges are really not as diverse as they should be. Do you think that
Yeah.
these two issues are related, like the lack of kind of diversity on the curriculum and the lack of diversity among the students? Like, should the university kind of look to address the two problems together?
Yeah, so I definitely think that they're connected. That's a really good question. I just feel like you're so if you come to Oxford as a student who's coming, from maybe like a lower income background, you're not white, so you're like you're BAME. And I just feel like you would inherently feel less represented by the curriculum here. Like, just speaking from personal experience, I have never been more conscious of the fact that I'm not white until I came to Oxford. I've never been more conscious about the fact that I'm studying such a Eurocentric curriculum, especially during prelims when you don't really have that much choice. So I feel like when you increase diversity, you're going to have more students just based on their background. So I'm not saying that if you don't identify as, being from a marginalized or underrepresented group, you can't feel like there are things to be addressed with the Oxford curriculum. But I just feel like you do see that lack of representation. And so I think that actually having perhaps a more diverse student body is going to lead to more calls for Oxford to diversify in a range of different ways. And I do think that the university should be tackling both these issues at the same time, because I think that both of them are extremely, when you think about how they both fit into addressing like more systemic problems within our society, I think that they're both hugely important because, like an Oxford education provides you with so much. So if you work on improving the access to that education or the access to higher education in general, I think that you're pursuing the same wider goals as is an initiative to like diversify the curriculum at Oxford is. We want to be able to educate people about these wider problems. So that the wider goal, when it links to wider society and like systems of oppression that are there, and systems of privilege that are also there. I think that those two, so diversifying like the cohort of students who are entering, making sure that you're making those pathways accessible for a diverse range of students, and then also diversifying the curriculum itself, the tutors, the ways in which we're taught. I think that they're very interconnected.
Really? Okay. So that's kind of an interesting point. So would you say that like the teaching staff at Oxford, obviously I don't know kind of who exactly you've been like communicating with in the university staff, but would you say that among kind of the teaching staff, there's like a higher level of sympathy with what you're trying to do? Because obviously they're the people who teach this, but they might not have that much say in what actually goes on the curriculum. But would they prefer to be teaching in a more diverse content?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited you asked that question because we're working on, so we reached out to students, right, to sign this open letter, and now we are working on reaching out to tutors as well. So we have like a draft of an email that we want to send tutors who we've flagged up as teaching politics at the undergraduate level at a range of different colleges. So we're talking specifically about prelims at this stage, just because for this initiative, everyone has to do the same things at prelims for politics. So we felt that to start ourselves off, we wanted to focus on that. So we are planning to reach out to them like within the next week. So I don't have an answer for you for that question, but I'm excited you asked it because we're definitely working towards doing that.
Okay, well, we'll keep tuned on that one then. So do you think that I guess this is quite like a broad question, but do you think that this lack of representation has been, do you think a deliberate is a fair word for it? Has it just been kind of like an accidental symptom of like the prevalence of white male voices in our society and academia in general? Or do you think that actually really it's not just kind of passive racism? Do you think there is active racism that's going on at kind of the higher levels of Oxford?
Wow, okay. I just don't think that I'm well enough informed to speak on whether there's active racism going on at like higher levels of university administration. There might be, but I would definitely say that it is a product of like racist systems that we have had in place. So the fact that our curriculum is not more diverse, or the fact that we don't have the cohort of students that are admitted to Oxford every year is not as diverse as it should be. I feel like those elements, that lack of diversity is due to, racist, classist, sexist institutions, and like many more other types of identities that people have, which are marginalized by society. I think that those structures that we have definitely play a role in why, we are trying to have this movement. But yeah, I don't feel like I would be able to comment on whether there's active racism. I have heard so many stories of active racism within the student body, and like other things that students have experienced. But when it comes to like upper levels of, the administration at Oxford, I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Fair enough. So do you think then that like kind of academia, and I guess particularly Oxford, because obviously Oxford is like a very prominent university, it's, you know, one that people know and is very kind of high performing. So would you say that like Oxford and academia have kind of a responsibility to actually be kind of at the forefront of kind of modernizing and diversifying what gets taught, because that's how you kind of produce sort of like high level kind of voice, like, you know, BAME voices who can then be taught, you know, like at Oxford? Like, do you think that Oxford needs to be kind of taking the lead on that in order to create kind of a far more diverse academia in general?
Yeah, I definitely think that, yeah, I agree with everything that you've said. I think Oxford has a responsibility, and other, you know, very elite, prestigious universities around the world, because we have the resources and we also have like the prestige, to be honest. Like, if, you know, there's a responsibility because we're at the forefront of so many things academic, that we be at the forefront of, you know, actively trying to be anti-racist in the way that we teach, in what we teach, in who our students are taught by. So I think that there definitely is a responsibility for Oxford to step up, just because we have, like, the university has such an enormous degree of influence and privilege as well. And I think that we really need to use it. And more, and not more importantly, but additionally, students at the university, you know, when you graduate, you do benefit from having like a certain level of educational privilege as well. So as graduates and as, you know, current students at the university, I think we all actually do have an increased responsibility to use the privilege that we have to try and really push for anti-racist initiatives, and really make sure that those are carried forward by the university.
Okay. So I suspect you're probably aware, like it seems to be the case that there have been student-led movements to decolonize the curriculum, as it's been called at Oxford, for quite a few years now, and it kind of always seems to be kind of like a, you know, a hot topic that students are kind of very interested in. Obviously, it's good that now we've got kind of a formal movement, but do you think that progress has been made, like, in that time, in kind of the many years that we've been having people saying this is a bad idea, we need to get more diverse curriculum?
So I think that there have definitely been like indicators of progress. So the one thing that I think about, so this was before I came to Oxford, but, you know, the history faculty said that you had to take one paper, which was at least one paper, which was non-British, non-European history, which is progress. It's definitely not sufficient. And it seems like, I mean, you know, within that paper, you might not even discuss race, you might not discuss empire, etc. But it is progress. I think it's a long way to go, though, especially since, you know, movements do tend to die out, like when students graduate, or when it's just not, when it's not like a hot topic anymore. So I feel like that's definitely, like we were talking about earlier, something that I'm worried about, that, you know, people will just stop having conversations about race and about other inequities. But I think it's important. I think what we have been experiencing in the last few months is really unprecedented, but in a good way. Like, I don't think there's ever been this much of a push for people to be having conversations about race and other, you know, systems of oppression. So I really hope that it's different. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think that movements have died out, and the change or the progress that has been made, with the example that I gave, it's just not substantial enough at all.
Yeah. So I guess that the issue that students kind of, they leave uni after, you know, 3 or 4 years, and students of course love to be kind of activists in general. It's difficult to, I guess, keep kind of student attention on one issue. I guess we've spoken about that already, but how do you think we should deal with the kind of students who maybe are resistant to, like, students who are resistant to their curriculum being changed, you know, students who don't think that, like, forced diversity should mean they have to deal with different things? How can we kind of educate them when they are unwilling to kind of take these new kind of modules that maybe they have to take, for example, with history?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I feel like there are, you know, a lot of students who do feel that way, who feel like, well, why should I have to learn about race? Why should I have to learn about empire? Why should they be compulsory elements? And I think that it's important to, you know, have educated conversations with them. So it's important to, whatever you're saying when you're trying to convey your ideas. So you need to have, like, you need to back it up with statistics, with research, you know, with the open letters, and say, like, these are so many students that support it, there's student demand for it. And also try and really push for people to be, I guess, to educate themselves as well, and like share resources, make it easy for students to actually, you know, educate themselves. through, I think social media is so great because it's just often so simplified. Like it's not about reading a book or reading an article. It's there and like kind of a graphic for you. And I think that there's so many amazing resources. So it's about connecting some students to those resources and also having those like personalized conversations with them and really coming from a place of like, this is my opinion and it's valid because like there are these pieces of evidence behind it.
Do you think there will come a time kind of in the progress of like campaigning on this issue where things like kind of open letters and like this kind of honest and open discourse that you've been talking about, when that becomes not enough and maybe things more like kind of protests, like actual kind of student action that's maybe a bit more hostile towards the university, do you think that will ever be necessary? We'll ever need to say, well, that's the only thing that's gonna change anything?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an interesting question. I think that personally, when I'm thinking about like for this Diversify Politics initiative in general, whether like protests would be more effective than trying to go through official channels of communication, I'm more inclined at this point to say that like pursuing official channels of communication is the better way to go. I think that protests have so much power in terms of like disrupting um, disrupting daily life. So they draw so much attention. They're such a powerful way to convey your cause. They really show mass support and they apply a lot of pressure. So they definitely are so beneficial as like an advocacy tactic from that perspective. But I think that when you like coming from the perspective of wanting to reform the curriculum, it's important for its students to be involved in that conversation. And I think that in order for us to be most directly and most effectively involved in that conversation, we need to be following these like official channels of communication with the university or the departments. And I agree that they're tedious. I mean, even just from us at Diversify Politics trying to get in touch, like the UJCC just didn't help us. And then from the actual department, it was like quite a vague response. And a bit of a, stop talking about this right now, we'll focus on it in Michaelmas. So I get it's frustrating. And so I do anticipate it being frustrating, like going through official, like having open discourse with open letters. But I think we really need to keep at it because unfortunately, you need to do things on the university's terms if you want them to really listen to you and have like a productive conversation with you and for you to have a say in an issue such as diversifying the curriculum.
Okay, so are you then saying that like the most effective way of doing this is kind of collaboration with the university, as opposed to kind of more like hostile, kind of dragging them forward, in spite of the fact that they do seem to be not quite silencing this discussion, but they don't seem to be particularly keen to kind of have this open discussion, and they don't seem to be particularly keen to make progress. But are you saying that we should still try and work with them to make progress and kind of be optimistic that they will, they have good intentions?
Yeah, so I think that especially at the stage where the campaign is right now, it's important to be optimistic just because we haven't had like a formal discussion with the university as yet. So I don't think they are trying to sweep the issue under the rug. I think that it's just like it's not a priority at this point in time. And they have said it will be a priority in Michaelmas, and I hope that it genuinely is. So I think that there's not too much to say about it right now, but I'm not like opposed to applying pressure to the university through a form of advocacy such as protest. I think it's really effective and very powerful. I just feel like at this stage especially, it's more effective to go through like the official channels of communication and try and have that open discourse with the university.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that currently there is sufficient awareness of this issue among Oxford students?
So when you say like sufficient awareness of this issue, if the issue is like diversifying your discipline in general, I feel like there is a lot of strong awareness amongst students, especially because we have been hearing, like I said before, there's just a global conversation about race, about other systems of oppression, about like decolonizing your curriculum, about representation, etc. So I feel like there is that wider awareness. But I think that we have a lot more to do in terms of getting students aware of specific initiatives. So like about the Diversify Politics or about like, other diversify your discipline elements. And I think that there's a long way to go, but I'm really hopeful about that. I feel like I'm working with some really great people who really want to actually see change happen. And so because people are aware of this wider issue, I think that we can really ensure that they're aware of the specific things that they can do within Oxford and like the different campaigns and initiatives that have been running.
Yeah, I think there is kind of an issue that we do face at the moment about, I hate to use the word slacktivism, but I do think that, and I say this as as a student and with the better will towards students in the world, we students do have a tendency to, you know, we get kind of hot button topics and we really like them, but we don't tend to kind of follow through and actually really kind of take serious action. And I guess that at the moment you're saying that kind of just sort of writing letters and having an open, honest discourse, that's not something that is going to be too kind of off-putting, as in by being too kind of demanding of students. But are you concerned that sometimes people, and especially kind of young people and especially students, can be a bit, you know, they'll say, oh, this is really bad, we should be doing more about this, but it often doesn't translate into actually doing things to kind of stop things like this from happening?
Yeah, no, so I definitely agree. Like performative activism, I have not seen more, like, I've never seen as much performative activism ever, like as compared to like the last few months. So I feel like it's definitely real and it's definitely problematic. Like I agree with what you've said. So it is a challenge to get people to actually, you know, you could say that the curriculum needs to be diversified, and you can sign the open letter. And I think, I mean, even signing the open letter is a step to like tangibly trying to make some change. If you just like saw us saying diversify the curriculum, you said, yep, I agree with that. I'm going to talk about it, but you're not actually going to do anything. I feel like there are definitely students who would do that. So it is a problem. And, you know, we are aware of that. I think it's about like really conveying like a sense of urgency and a sense of need to students, and making people aware of performative activism in general, and like calling people out when they are being performative. And, you know, I think calling people out constructively and saying that, you know, yeah, you say you support it, but what have you actually done? And I think that's a good way to not alienate people, but also get them to take tangible action for your cause, especially since they seem to be supporting it, even if it is performative. I think that you can always build upwards from people being performative. And that's honestly what I hope will happen.
No, that's really interesting. So I guess the problem with kind of maybe even getting to that stage, that of people accepting this problem and but not maybe doing that much, even the challenge with getting to there, and this is kind of like what we've addressed before, but I guess for a lot of young people, especially those who, you know, have been to maybe private schools, which a lot of people often have, who maybe they didn't have an at all diverse curriculum even at school or at uni. So I guess it can be difficult to be aware of just the scale of things that you're not aware of. So people, you know, people who don't take much of an interest in this sort of thing might think, well, my curriculum is perfectly diverse already, because from their point of view of what they know, it is diverse. So where would you recommend kind of people who are starting from not really being aware of all these things, how would they get access to the kind of literature that would kind of maybe open their eyes to just the whole schools of thought and the kind of, you know, the authors that they're missing out on?
Mm-hmm. So that's really good. And then, I mean, again, I'm going to say that social media has been such a powerful tool. And like, there are a lot of people who are performative activists on social media, but there are a lot of really great resources. I feel like, you know, because I've learned so much within the last few months. And I think that honestly, most of that learning has come from social media. I haven't really been like reading articles written by academics, or like, I mean, I've read a few books, but it's my primary mode of getting the information has been social media. And I think that it's because it's so condensed, it's easy to read, you know, it's eye-catching. I feel like there's a lot to be gained from following certain accounts that are actually trying to, you know, educate people about it. And honestly, in the future, I really hope that diversify your discipline, or like diversify politics, I think it's something that I want to do, is like have a social media presence, because I think that that's a really great way to reach students and convey the message in a way that, you know, it takes like less than 5 minutes to look at it. You can understand why we need to be doing the things that we're doing. And I think that that's a really great way. It's what I would suggest to people, like look up certain hashtags if you want to be more educated on like decolonizing your curriculum, like look up the hashtag of decolonizing curriculum, on platforms such as Instagram, because I feel like it's a lot more accessible for people who haven't really been thinking about this stuff before.
Okay, cool. Well, Nyla, thank you very much for your time. This is really interesting.
Oh, yeah, it was really good to talk to you.